case, we will begin the meeting with the roll call of members. Mr. Harris?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Royo.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Claxton.
Here.
Ms. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Diaz.
Here.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Here. Thank you very much. We begin with the approval of the January 4th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there council comments on the minutes? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Royo.
Aye.
Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Claxton.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. Thank you. We go then to the Personnel Committee. Councilor Caliste.
Thank you, Council President. And the Personnel Committee has on its agenda tonight 3 items. The first item is the nomination of Nicolas Meyers for the appointment to the Shade 3 Commission. So I don't know if Mr. Meyers is here tonight with us.
I think so.
Okay, so may I have a motion?
I move to, this is a reappointment, and I move that we move this to full council tomorrow evening.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Baker. So the next item on the agenda is
Councilor
Going to get all and approve.
yes, so sorry about that. May I have a motion to approve? All in favor?
We have a second. All in favor.
All in favors?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item is the nomination of Miriam Ortega Brown for the appointment of to the Planning Commission and for a term from December 31st, 2021 to December 31st, 2025. And as Mrs. Brown with us tonight? No?
No.
Okay, so this is a reappointment. So after the approval will be, her nomination will be forwarded to the City Council for approval tomorrow night. May I have a motion?
Motion to send this to full council tomorrow evening.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And the next item is the resolution, this 17, 2022, appointing Michaela Orwine to the Zoning Hearing Board. She is going to fill on an expired term until December 31st, 2022. So is Mrs. Orwine with us tonight?
Yes.
Would you please come forward to engage council about your interest for the position?
Hello.
So would you please introduce yourself to council?
Sorry?
Would you please introduce yourself to council?
Sure. I'm Michaela Allwine. Do you want me to talk about myself at all, or just?
Yes. Would you please tell us your goals for the hearing board during your term?
Yeah. So I have served on the Planning Commission now for about a year, and really excited for the opportunity to join the Zoning Hearing Board. I am the Director of Housing and Community Development currently for the County Redevelopment Authority. And I've worked for about 15 years now in community development, including many roles in zoning capacity, primarily in the city of Philadelphia. So I ran a few different zoning committees. They run it a little different there, but by neighborhood, they have community-based zoning committees, and I ran a few of those in the Kensington, Fishtown, and Port Richmond neighborhoods for 5 years. When I moved to Lancaster, I wanted to continue my community work, and now I work with the Redevelopment Authority, primarily doing affordable housing development, both rental and home ownership, and also working directly with low and moderate income homeowners to make sure that they are able to stay in their homes. So I'm really excited for this opportunity. I'm really passionate about cities and what makes cities work, and so I appreciate your consideration for this appointment.
And what motivates you to serve?
Sure. So I've lived in, larger and smaller cities kind of all throughout the country. And so I'm very interested in what makes cities work. And that's really people and how the built environment interacts with people and sort of, fosters a community and fosters kind of the way that people live. So I think zoning is a really important part of that puzzle, implementing the rules and kind of looking at how we can use those rules to shape our community is really interesting to me and very important.
Thank you. Any comments from council members?
Councilor Calix, I'd just like to say, welcome back.
Thank you.
Ms. Allwine, we got a chance to speak with Ms. Allwine at the end of 2019, or gosh, what year is it? 2021, wow. And you were kind enough to pause your appointment process as we let another member's term expire. And I'm glad that you're back. And so thank you very much for stepping up and volunteering.
Any other comments or questions? Any comments from the public? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks.
And may I have the motion?
I move to put resolution number 17 on the agenda for the council, for full council tomorrow evening.
Second. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
You still have
Oh,
to
no,
call.
all in favor? Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Thank you. In that case, we move then to the Finance Committee. Ms. Allwine, you are welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but you are not obligated to do so. Finance Committee, Councilor Bakay.
Thank you very much, Council President. The Finance Committee has several items on the agenda this evening, and first, I'd just like to note that the second item that you see before you, Resolutions 14, 15, and 16, this was my error. They should have not been included on this agenda this evening. They will be brought back before us in March. So we have 4 items on the agenda, and we'll begin with Resolution number 12, 2022, exonerating 2021 water and sewer fees, and Mr. Patrick Hopkins will speak to that.
So I wondered actually if we could move the parking authority item up just so then I can go through the rest of the ones that are non-parking authority related.
That would
Does
be
that
fine with me. The rest of the committee? All right, absolutely. Mr. Cohen, then, we'll start with our presentation on Bill number 2.
You can have this one.
This one's yours. Thank
Get the
you.
easy one, right? Good evening, everyone. I was before you several weeks ago, kind of gave the rationale before about the need for the 1 street meter rate increase. If you'd like, I could run through all those items again. If everyone's comfortable with where we left off last time, we can just deal with questions at this point.
If you want to give us just a brief
our garages, our staff, everything that we do here to maintain a best practice parking program to support the economic growth and development of the city, as we've done over my 12-year tenure. So, I think I answered the questions in the opinion piece fairly well. I try to keep my answers simple and understandable from a business perspective, a parking management perspective, but we do follow best practices in everything we do. This isn't Parking Authority or Larry Cohen going rogue. This is following what is best practices. We are an accredited parking organization. We're only one of
Got it back.
less than 50 in the country that abide by very rigorous standards like any accredited organization. Parking has one too. So we stay to that form in everything we do, from customer service to how we run our operations.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
You're welcome.
I'll open up to other members of the Finance Committee for comments or questions. Councilor Diaz?
Can you clarify, or can you give me an explanation again, that by increasing it, it would eliminate so much parking in the street? Is that what I understood? It would make them park in the parking garages versus being in the actual,
Right. So obviously, that's a good question. Obviously, we're not forcing anyone to do anything they don't want to do, right? We're not saying you have to park in the garage. What we're doing is, I guess it could be categorized as passive enforcement. It's passive enforcement by saying our limited on-street space, which is right in front of your business, should be the most valuable space in the city. So if you want that proximity to that business, there's a small premium to that, right? If you're going to park longer term, we're making it cheaper to park in the garage. We have, first of all, the rates will be cheaper in the garage. Plus, we provide many, many different validation programs for the businesses, which give them additional discounts off the garage rates. So it's a passive way of taking a parking program that works in unison, on-street and off-street, right? Too many times we're not looking at the whole picture. We're saying your prime parking should be greater if you want that prime space, and we're going to basically provide you discounts or provide it cheaper. If you're going to be here long-term, we want you in the garage. We want those on-street spaces next to the businesses to turn over as much as possible. We want there to be spaces available, up to 20. One out of every 5 spaces, if you drive around the central business district, you should be able to find a parking space instead of circling the block, many times waiting for the space to open, causing more traffic, causing the carbon footprint to be worse, or just standing and double parking with your flashes on, waiting for a car to pull out. So over time, that's the goal, right? To help in many different ways.
thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Are there any other comments or questions from other members of council?
Yes, if I may.
Councilor Calixte?
Thank you. What kind of feedback or response did you get from the public about the new parking meter rates? You said that you engaged with the public, about the new rates. What kind of feedback or response did you have?
Well, when I say I've engaged with the business community,
Yes.
we've engaged with the public just via, if nothing else, via newspaper articles, TV articles. Everyone's very well aware of the increase. I had received, nor the office has received any negative comments directly.
Did you conduct any survey or something like that?
We did not conduct a public survey, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Calixte.
Thank you.
Comments?
I'm sorry. I'll leave it go.
Go ahead, Mr. Cohen.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to open it up now to any comments or questions from the public.
It's okay. All yours.
Because they like to put it down.
Thank you so much
Ivan
for
Acosta Velez. I live at 804 Highland Avenue,
Thank you.
and I'm a senior citizen. And when I came here, I wasn't. Guess what? What are we doing for the handicapped people that do want to come and buy here? What are we doing? You know, the people that can't walk from the garage to go and get something done. I hope you realize as council that a lot of cities are having to eat their parking garages because a lot of businesses are going away. Think about it. Okay, it might be a quarter, 50 cents. How much are you raising it? $1 an hour. Okay? Now, what are we doing for the handicapped? Like me, I'm old. Takes me a while to go up steps now. Okay? And it might not bug you because I'm the one that's always here. You. Okay? But people have talked to me. I've been in this community over 40 years. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I didn't immigrate from Puerto Rico. I moved from Puerto Rico to Massachusetts, and from Massachusetts to the beautiful state of Pennsylvania. So please think about it, because we don't think about Miss Mabel that's handicapped or Miss Lucy that's handicapped, and I'm just using those names. Okay? Please think about that. It's not the dollar, it's the inconvenience that there's not too many handicapped. How many handicapped parkings you have for those that you want quick to leave?
I'll get you a count.
Yeah, I mean, because that's my concern. I'm getting old, you know? And so please look at it. It's not the raise of the money. The mayor is trying to get people into the city, stores into the city. And is that the correct way? Or maybe we can do it a different way. Another city puts the thing and they give you only 20 minutes there. Don't raise the price. 20 minutes and you get a fine and people will move. Okay, you have this thing with that machine, okay, whatever you call it. Okay, we're investing too much and we keep on, just $1. Okay, the water's going up, the sewer's going up. You know, for me as an old folk, okay, now I'm Social Security. So please think about it. That's all I'm asking. It's not the dollar. It's what can we do to mingle and bingo and people can come downtown. Okay? Please think about it.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Beke, can I follow up with a question?
Absolutely. Councilor Royo.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, to follow up with Mr. Acosta's comments, are there ways to provide incentivized pricing or discount pricing for parking fees? So, for example, we're doing a blanket increase, but if someone with a disability or had an electric car, for example, are there ways to have incentivized or discounted pricing for those types of situations?
Well, let me address one thing first, and then I'll come back. Regarding the gentleman's request for handicap parking, the parking authority does not control how much handicap parking there is on the street. There is a process for that. That's the traffic commission. So any request for handicap parking, whether it's in a neighborhood or downtown, that request goes to the traffic commission. Traffic commission makes the rules and regulations that the parking authority abides by as far as the makeup of the street parking. So, for example, when the Central Market was undergoing some renovations several years back, we added additional handicap parking in proximity to the Central Market at the directive of Traffic Commission. So the parking authority does not have the authority to, unilaterally make those decisions. It's dictated by Traffic Commission. So I thought that was important for the gentleman to know and for the public to know that was a good venue to vet that out. And the Traffic Commission adds handicap spaces every month. Every time they have meetings, there's a list of handicap spaces that they add into neighborhoods and also downtown. Okay, so back to your specific question as far as incentivizing parking for handicapped and electric vehicle. That was the question?
As an example, are there ways to do discounted pricing, or do you offer discounted pricing for different scenarios such as those?
Well, we have a laundry list of different discounted programs that are available for easy access to see on our website. I don't know the specific scenario around that request. We don't do specific. There used to be a best practice of providing free parking for handicap parking across the country. Unfortunately, it became a very abusive program, trying to validate handicap placards and doing enforcement of folks who shouldn't be in those spaces and were in those spaces. So that kind of faded away. The critical component for me is making sure that those folks with disabilities have the best access possible to parking where they need to go. I put that as a top priority for myself. So if there's in our parking garages, we make sure that we maintain 2% availability of handicap parking in our garages. We make sure that our handicap spaces are the best accessible spaces. We just restriped the Penn Square garage. We made sure all those handicap spaces are on the first level so that those with disabilities or wheelchairs would not have to try to navigate elevators. So making sure that the spaces in proximity to where folks need to go is utmost priority to me. We follow the directive of Traffic Commission in where those spaces should go, and we make those changes accordingly based on the request and the approval. As far as electric vehicle spaces, I talked about that at the last meeting. I think it'd be one of our initiatives to be on the cutting edge. As you know, I put electric vehicle charging in all of our garages over 4 years ago when it wasn't something that everyone was doing. We provide our electric vehicle charging for free. We incur that expense. We will look to, in this next phase, as part of the revenues generated from the increase, to provide some electric vehicle charging options within the neighborhood community where there's a demand and need. That'd be fairly cutting edge for us to be doing that, and I'm committed to doing that as well for that expansion to promote those vehicles. I drive an electric vehicle myself.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Diaz?
In regards to the parking, you mentioned that there is disabled accessibility, but there is a parking garage, I apologize, about a block away from the Fulton Opera House, where I received probably about a year ago, where a handicapped person could not go in or out of that parking. Do you know if that was ever taken care of? Is that something that you're planning to take care of? It's just a block away on the left side on South Prince Street.
That is not our garage.
It's not?
That is
okay.
the Steinman parking garage, which is owned by LNP.
But,
So,
okay,
yes, but I would let them know about that.
thank you.
You're welcome. We don't have all the garages in the city, but that's okay.
I think we had another comment or question from the public. Mr.
Okay.
Dastra?
Hello, Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue.
Thank you.
So I appreciate what you're saying, Ivan, that we need to do more. What I would also put forward here is we've had conversations about parking, the availability of space on our streets. Seniors, 65 plus, can ride Red Rose Transit Authority for free. So if you are fortunate enough to have a good bus route, you can have very beneficial access to downtown Lancaster without paying for parking at all. I actually came forward to say I support this increase, and not only that, I think if it's up to council, I would argue you need to go even further, potentially up to $3.50 an hour, because I don't think that the differential of 50 cents is going to make enough to incentivize someone to park in our garage structures. To Mr. Cohen's point, this is really a supply and demand issue. The street parking should be a premium. Like, it makes sense to me to have that be a premium cost. And also, this might seem strange to argue as well, but I believe it will result in less tickets to have people utilize the parking garages more and to have that differential to really incentivize them into the garages, because one of my favorite things to do years ago, I haven't done it recently, I have learned my lesson, is actually trying to avoid paying the meters, like trying to be in and out fast as possible. If you get into the garage, you can't avoid paying and getting your stub. And I think one of the issues that a lot of residents or non-residents coming into the city may have is going downtown, trying to avoid the meter because they think they're going to be quick, and then ending up getting a ticket in the end because we have robust enforcement, which we should. But what I think this also leads to is my third point, longer stays downtown because you no longer have a 2-hour time frame. Like, no matter what you do, when you're doing street parking, you are capped at 2 hours. So when you go downtown, if you park, you have to stay 2 hours max, and then you got to go, or you might get a ticket. So I think that we really need to be getting people in the parking garages because it prevents people from leaving in the long run. You no longer have to say, oh, well, I got to go move my car at least. Like, no, you can stay. And Mr. Cohen, I might be right. The parking gets cheaper per hour the longer you stay, right? So it makes sense to me to incentivize that as a reason for people to go in the garages even more. So my 3 points are that, supply and demand, I believe it will result in less tickets and longer stays in the downtown area. I would suggest personally a higher increase than $1. I would go $3.50. Like, it might seem ridiculous, but if this is something that only happens every decade and a half, maybe it would be beneficial to do this now, so that if we do see we have infrastructure demands to meet, we might be able to take from these premiums more funding to potentially make the parking authority even better. Because, Mr. Cohen, I don't know how you do it sometimes. I know it's a stressful job. I know it's a very contentious issue, our public parking. So, yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there. I think that we need to push forward with this strongly and encourage people to use the bus system even more on top of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dastra.
I should have stopped there, right? It's rare that it gets public support, right?
Do you have anything further, Mr. Cohen?
I just want to say, and I mentioned it the last time, I'm sorry I didn't mention it this time. The focus of the parking authority is compliance over enforcement. We want folks to comply to parking. We don't want to enforce it. We provide the parking app for the last 8+ years to make it easy to park and pay for your parking. So we're very proud of that, and the folks who utilize it are very proud of it as well. And the last thing is, as I've stated over and over, all the revenue the parking authority gets goes right back into the program to make the program the best it can be. And we're proud of providing that. And we thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to move,
If it's very brief, Mr. Acosta, only because, and I did for you as well. If you have if you have another question to ask Mr. Cohen, you can do so right now. Mr. Acosta, I just have you come to this, only so that you can be heard on the recording. Thank you.
everybody with the same rules, okay? My question to you, sir, do you have the number of tickets that you give in that area, the DID program, the downtown? Do you have a number for that?
Sure.
Can I get that number somehow?
Do a right to know request, you can get whatever information you'd like.
Okay, my other question is, on your board, do you have a Hispanic or someone from our community? Because I know you don't, so that's why I'm asking.
Okay, I mean, everyone on our board is from the community.
No, Hispanic or
Is that irrelevant?
African-American community member.
Is that a relevant question?
Yes, it is very relevant.
I don't appoint my board.
Okay, who appoints the board? Okay, do we have someone?
We do not have an African-American representative on the Parking Authority Board. That is correct.
We don't have a Hispanic on that board either?
I'm not sure.
For what it's worth, Mr. Phil Cabasa
Yes.
is Latino, but
Yes. I wasn't sure.
he's the board secretary for what it's worth. I
So-
can't speak to anybody else.
Okay, and my concern, someone handicapped that knows how hard it is, okay, to go from the garage, to go and get some flowers, to get whatever downtown, it takes them around 10 minutes to go, please look at this. Because you're gonna close your city downtown and you're already losing businesses.
Mr. Acosta, I'd be happy to talk to you about some of the things that we're doing to address the walkability of the city. I also know that it does take a longer time as a handicapped person to get around the city. We're actually, later in the agenda, going to be talking about some of the ways that we're improving handicap accessibility throughout the city through our Sidewalk Repair program. So if you'd like to stay for that, you're welcome.
That's fine, but didn't we get a court, something we're doing with court because of the sidewalks?
And Mr. Acosta, now we're veering way off of this topic, and just in keeping with the fact that we have a long agenda, we will get to that conversation a little bit later.
Okay, you're gonna get to it later?
It's on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta. I'll hear a motion from the members of the committee.
Motion to move Administration Bill Number 222 to tomorrow evening's agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And just as a reminder that this will be a first reading because it is a bill, so it will come up tomorrow and then on the following meeting as well. So there'll be two additional opportunities to engage with this particular item. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we will go back to our first resolution, number 12. One day we'll be cord-free.
It's like my nightmare.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
Okay. Thank you for that little bit of humor time. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the resolution regarding water and sewer exonerations for city-owned and related properties. This is an annual resolution that we do for, I think Councilor Caliste is probably the only one who's not familiar with this, each year for city-owned properties and a number of related properties. We do exonerations of the prior year's water and sewer charges. We keep track of all the usage at all the properties that you see listed in the resolution. There are, sort of 2.5 pages of properties that are listed here. All of them are city-owned with the exception of the airport fire line, which is the first item on the list, and then the public library property. All of the rest of those are city-owned properties. The reason that we keep track of the usage is so that we can track any leaks or anything like that at the properties. But then at year end, because we own the water system and we own the sewer system, we're not going to charge ourselves for those services. So we do these exonerations. The reason for the airport fire line being on there, the airport, we've had a longstanding agreement with the airport. When we have a snow event that requires significant snow removal equipment, we've been able to use their large snow blowers that they use on the runway there at the airport. I hate doing this presentation in February and talking about large snow events, but I have to bring that up as the reason that we have the airport fire line on there. And then the other non-city owned property is the public library. The exoneration this year is a total of $3,672.46. The majority of that is on the water side. And this exoneration is actually used as part of the city's in-kind contribution to the public library when they submit their community involvement and community commitment reports to the state on an annual basis. So the total of water charges that we'd be exonerating is $53,626.08, and the total amount of sewer charges is $55,506.56. And this is at 27 total locations.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from the committee? Or other members of council?
Counselor Bickey.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Craig.
Thank you. Patrick, how often do we use the airport fire line?
As little as, as little as possible, because we don't want there to be that much snow. I think the last time was about 4 or 5 years ago, as I remember. And it's when we have snow that's like, 2 feet of snow, and simply plowing doesn't deal with it. Like, we actually have to haul the snow away. And in that case, we've used both our own equipment, we've used leased equipment, and we've used the airport authority's equipment. And that's when you see those like large convoys of trucks lined up, and just, we're filling them up like in 2 minutes, like a huge dump truck in 2 minutes with one of those big snow blowers. So we don't use them all that often, but when we need them, it really comes in handy.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions?
Mr. Campbell's been fortunate enough not to have a snowstorm during his time here with the city that we've required the airport snow blower.
We keep talking about it. It's never happened.
Okay, this is too
Sorry,
much.
I just totally jinxed it there.
Let's not have one.
Are there any other comments or questions on the resolution from the public? I will hear a motion on this one.
I motion to move, Resolution 12 to tomorrow evening's agenda.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. And then, Mr. Hopkins, that will move us then, again, omitting item 2 for this evening, to a presentation on the city's fee study.
Thank you. So with any luck, this will, okay, good. Wanted to give you a brief overview of the fee study that we've had going on really through 2021. Just this morning, actually got the full draft report from Maximus, which is a firm that we engaged for this, specifically for this fee study. We have used Maximus as a firm for another bit of work that they do for us on an annual basis. And this actually goes back at least as far as 2006 or 2007 that they've been involved with the city. Maximus did a fee study for us in 2009. That was the last citywide sort of comprehensive review of fees. The other work that Maximus does for us on an annual basis is a cost allocation study. So if you think of things like human resources and information technology in the mayor's office, and the sort of institutional overhead of the city government, we use that Maximus cost allocation study to charge the water fund, the sewer fund, stormwater fund, solid waste and recycling funds for those general government overhead costs that are allocated to those specific operations. We budget, for instance, all of human resources within the general fund budget, administrative services budget, but then obviously we're hiring, processing benefits and all that sort of thing for water and sewer operations. So we charge out those things. So that is the reason that we engage Maximus for this fee study, because they already understand our budget, they understand city operations, and they also have all of that cost information for our employees and our operations already sort of in their wheelhouse. So that's why we engaged Maximus. The reason that we engaged them, one, if you remember back in 2019, we had PFM came in to do the strategic management planning program. One of the recommendations out of that program was to do this fee study. We had, I said earlier that we had Maximus do a fee study back in 2009. Since then, we had periodic reviews of individual fees for things like building permits and housing inspections and licensing, things like that, but we didn't have a comprehensive citywide review of all of the fees that we charge. So that's the reason that we did the fee study, and it's really two different things. One, it is, it is additional revenue to come into primarily the general fund, but there are some pieces of this that are in other funds. The other piece of it is really, to me, the really almost more important is the equity. The services, the plan reviews, all of the processing of a building permit, we could charge nothing for that. And what we would be doing is basically charging all of the city taxpayers for a corporation or a business or even an individual who wanted to do an improvement to their property or build a new property. So rather than putting the cost burden of that process on all taxpayers, we can drill down to the detail and say it costs X amount to provide that service, and the person who's requesting that service should be paying for that service, and they're paying for it through a fee. So that's the general concept of why we did the fee study and what the difference is between a fee and a tax. So the next is just sort of the general principles for this, and they're really quite simple. Fees can only be charged up to the amount that it actually costs to provide the service. So there's no profit that we can get from a particular fee. We can't say, well, it costs us $50 to provide this service, but we want to make some money, so we're going to actually charge $300 for it. And the second is that for policy reasons, we can make a decision collectively to either partially or wholly subsidize a particular service, so that if it costs $400 to provide the particular service, but we think that that is too significant a cost for whatever reason, we can decide to dial that back and either charge nothing for that or charge a reduced price, a $25 or a $50 or $75 fee for that particular service, even though we know that it actually costs the city $400 to provide that service. So to meet both of those principles, that's really what the fee study does. So they're looking at or providing us with a very specific, detailed information about the cost to provide each individual particular service. And when I say very detailed, the report that I got is, a PDF report. It's 750 pages long. So it is going into extreme mind-numbing minutia into the cost and the detail for each of the individual services. So what did Maximus look at when they're doing this fee study? So they looked at all services where we currently charge a fee. So we have a fee in place and have had for, either a number of years or a number of decades. They also looked at, and this was at our request, looked at services where there currently isn't a fee, but where we incur a cost to provide a particular service, and where they could identify a service or a bureau or a department could identify a service that they provide, and they can drill down to some detail and provide some cost estimate, that we ought to at least understand what it costs us to provide that service. And so they've also reviewed those particular services. They've looked at the number of units of services that were provided. And in this case, and this was part of the difficulty that Maximus was running into during the year, because normally they would look at a fully audited year, and they would review that year both for the number of units of a service provided and the cost of the staff and the benefits and everything in that particular year. And in this case, 2020, everybody knows what that was. So what they did is looked back and requested unit service provision detail from bureaus and departments from 2019. For the cost side of things, though, they looked at the 2021 budget for the actual salaries and benefit costs and operating expenses for individual departments. So they looked at number of units of services, they looked at the individual positions involved in providing the service, and looked at each step of the service provided. So in some cases, there will be multiple people in a couple different departments that handle a particular service, and I'll talk about one of those in a little bit. So they're looking at each of the sort of business process steps and looking at each individual person, and they're drilling down to the number of minutes that a person spends on X on the given service. And then lastly, they're looking at the salary and benefit expenses for each of the individual employees who are involved in that workflow process to provide the service. And as I said, they're looking at those costs based on the 2021 budget. So this is 3 samples out of a list of policy is just their language of, if you are to fully recover the cost of providing the service, this is what the fee would be. This is one where I said there is a policy discussion to have. This one, I think the discussion is very straightforward, that there is no way that we're going to charge $406 for the installation of a handicap parking permit. So the policy decision here can be very simple here, and just simply saying, this is what it actually costs us to provide that service. It's important to know what it costs to provide the service, but it makes no sense to charge that level, and likely it makes sense to charge zero and continuing to charge zero for that service. But we should, as an entity, as an organization, we should know what it costs to provide particular services. So that's one example. The second is in building codes. And this is this is one of a whole host of different building, electrical, plumbing related permitting costs. So this is a tier 3 multi-trade. So think of a larger project that has HVAC and plumbing and electrical, all of that sort of wrapped in the project. The number of units you see there is 74, so there are 74 of these Tier 3 permits issued in 2019. It costs us a total of $311,000 to process and do all the reviews and the inspections and all that sort of thing. Our current fee is set such that we've raised $45,232. So right now, there is a building permit subsidy for this Tier 3 set of properties of $266,000. I know in the discussions that we had back to 2009, when we did the last fee study, and there have been changes to the building permits since then. So that was one where there had been periodic increases to the building permits. Back in 2009, the discussion was, if we set the building permit fee for a large property like that, where to fully recover the cost, we're going to disincentivize building in the city, and we're going to drive developers away from building in the city. That may be a very different discussion in 2022, when we have so many large projects going on. It doesn't mean that we necessarily would want to fully recover the cost, but there's a discussion there to be had about, do we want to subsidize a particular service? And if so, at what level will we want to subsidize? But this gives us the information to know what it actually costs us to provide that particular service. And then the third one is in the Police Bureau. This is accident reports. So 1,221 accident reports requested from the Police Bureau in 2019. Cost us $105,671 to provide that service, and we've recovered $18,315 because our current fee, the recommended fee would be $86.54, and our current fee is $15. So we're subsidizing that service to the tune of a little over $87,000. And that's my third example of where we have some particular cases where there are state mandates about the levels of where a fee can be set. And in this case, even though in 2019, we provided a subsidy of $87,000, the state's saying you can charge $15 for an accident report, and that's it. So there are some places throughout this fee study where we don't really have an option. And there are very few of these, but I wanted to give you a sense of kind of the mix of the different types of fees that we will see. As you'll see, paragraph number 3 there, city of the first class, which is city of Philadelphia, they can charge $25. Where does that come from? I have no idea. Clearly, this $15 I know has been in place for at least 20 years. So that's something at the state level that hasn't changed. And we're impacted by that because we're subsidizing the cost of that. So next steps in this really is, we've received the draft report. During January, we had received information that was the full list of fees. Maximus had individual meetings with bureaus and departments to review the fee areas and fees in their areas. Made some corrections to some of their reviews, got some more information. So they went through a very detailed process there. So the next step is really for the department reviews during February to review, the report information for accuracy, but more importantly, to look at the policy implications of instituting the fees at the 100% recommended level, or of dialing that back for some reason. We could then bring an actual set of recommendations to City Council in March. And then I have on here April for the actual ordinances and or ordinance/resolutions. Those could really be combined in March, but I put April just because there may be some questions, there may be additional feedback from council or the public about particular decisions that we're recommending on the policy implications and subsidization of certain services that we'd want to make a change. Some of these fees are currently set by city ordinance. Most are on a list that were originally established and have been modified over time in a resolution or by resolution. So what I think you're going to see ultimately is probably an ordinance that establishes for those that are currently in the city code and set by ordinance, changes those based on our recommendations and allows for future changes based by resolution, so that ultimately we have one master list of all of these fees, all of which can be changed by resolution going forward. So that is the overview and, what you'll see coming to you. Just thought it was important for you to understand kind of what we are dealing with and what type of information is going to be coming to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I do have one clarifying question, and I know that we'll have a lot of opportunities to hear more about this once there's actual legislation moving forward. But I want to just go back really quickly to the large projects and the commercial projects that you called out. Can you give like a dollar amount for those projects, just so the members of the public might have an idea of who we're speaking about when we're talking about the impacts of those permit costs?
I looked this up before I came down because I thought that question might come up, and I believe the Tier 3 projects were capped at $6 million. So that was one of the things that was also in place previously, is that there are Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 projects. Each of those has I call it an artificial cap. So it says that, this is the fee that's going to be charged per square foot, but the project cost that the fee is based on is going to be capped at, I think one is $16 million, one is $12 million, and one is $6 million. I think that's the structure. Which means that at that highest cost, if you have a $70 million project, you're going to be paying the same building permit fee as, say, a $12 million project, because the cap for that tier has been set at $12 million. Again, that was an issue of, do we want to, is a larger fee, permit fee, going to scare away a developer? And, the decision at the time was to put those caps in place. That is something, policy implication-wise, for us to review and make another recommendation on, as to whether or not any cap should be in place, and if there is a cap, what should it be?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Briefly, any other comments from council or questions on the presentation before we move to the next one? Councilor Diaz.
Yeah. Patrick, is there a way to get the information that was behind me?
Yes, I can
Forward
send
it to
this,
us.
I can send this presentation to Bernie. Ultimately, what we'll bring to you in March, you will see the entire 5-page list of all of the fees that were as recommended, and then as recommended by Maximus, and then ultimately what our recommendation is as to where the fees should actually be set.
And it will have all the tiers that you were just speaking
Yes.
of?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Bacon, I do have one question.
Councilor Craig.
Patrick, has there ever been a discussion on how to recoup the funds for the handicap signs that are put up?
Not that I'm aware of. There has never been a charge for that service. Clearly, collectively, that decision can be made as to whether or not there should be any charge at all. I think it's pretty clear that, if a decision were made by council to set the fee at $406, you might have a few people come to some
I think you're
subsequent
right.
council meetings to talk about that. But I'm not aware of any discussion that's happened, previously with the administration or with council, and not just this one, but, prior ones, at least since I've been around, about having any kind of a fee for that service.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
Okay.
And we're also going to be hearing from you about capital finance as well. This is just a presentation to council for these. There isn't any legislation proposed on this evening's agenda. If there's a question that I could perhaps relay to Mr. Hopkins, if you wanted to speak with me after, we can do that. But there isn't any actual legislation on the agenda for this evening for this one. Thank you.
Okay. And for this one, this is just really informational only. Over the last, year plus, primarily Department of Public Works has been working diligently on creating a not just a capital project list, but a full capital project plan, looking out in 1 year, 5 year, 20-year plus increments. You wouldn't believe the spreadsheets that Mr. Campbell's department has been producing of projects, but it's really, it's very impressive. So that's one part of capital project planning. The piece that I'm going to deal with this evening, and really, wanted to give you a preview of what will be coming in the coming months, is the actual financing of those projects. So the primary timing driver of this is there is a set of projects in the water fund that are on the list of things that we are, as we're in the midst of the Public Utility Commission rate case for water customers, for fees for water rates for water customers outside of the city. We have a list of projects that we have said to the commission, we are going to complete these water capital projects by the end of 2022. As you know, the last time we did a full bond issue was back in 2018. We brought to you a couple of Penvest applications, funding applications, one for sewer and more recently for water. Those were for very sort of specific, discrete projects that had already been designed, engineered, and we were basically ready to put a shovel on the ground because we already had bids out, bids received and awarded. So the timing of this partially is driven by that set of water fund projects that need to be completed by the end of 2022, and we don't have financing in place right now to do those projects. There are also a host of different projects in the general fund, public works realm, building facilities, parks, things like that, and then also in stormwater. And so what we want to bring to you later in 2022 is a comprehensive funding proposal for all of those projects for, say, a 2 to 3 year period. But in the short term, we also have a short-term financing need for those, primarily for the water fund projects, but there are some stormwater and also general fund projects that we need funding in place in the very short term. And I'm sort of thinking of this as more like a bridge loan. So we know that we're going to be doing a larger financing later in 2022, and I'm thinking, June, July, August time period. But we also need funding now to get us to that point. In talking with Darryl Peck at Concord Public Finance, the best way to move forward with that and the fastest way to move forward with that is to bring to you a resolution that would authorize a tax and revenue anticipation note. Those of you who have been around for a little while are familiar with those, where we used to do those at year end, and it was more like a bridge loan to get us through the cash poor times of the year, which is like December, January, and February, until we started seeing real estate tax revenues coming in. And that was a bridge loan of a different type for a different reason. But the tax and revenue anticipation note vehicle is one that can be done in very short order. Darrell's firm can put out a request for proposals to banks listing basically a principal amount that we want to borrow with a termination date at 12/31 of 2022. He puts that out on the street. He can do that during February, and we can bring to you a recommendation for which bank and the financing rate that we would have for that tax and revenue anticipation note. We would bring that to you at the March 7th Finance Committee meeting. March is like February. March 7th is the committee meeting, and then March 8th is the first regular meeting of the month. So we could have the financing approval in place basically within the next month. It takes about 2 weeks or so after the final approval to actually have a closing and for the city to have money in hand for those projects to be funded. That is a very short timetable, and it's one that we wouldn't be able to meet if we were going through the bond issuance process right now. Part of that is that a tax and revenue anticipation note doesn't require DCED approval, so that's a 20-day at least process. In this case, we just notify DCED that we're doing this tax and revenue anticipation note. The other piece is we don't have to go through all that process with a bond auction and the Moody's rating and all that sort of thing. It is simply putting an RFP to banks out there, getting their proposals back and choosing the one that has the lowest interest rate. So again, the anticipation would be to put that RFP out during February, come to you on March 7th with a proposal for which bank to go with for the TRAN, the Tax and Revenue Anticipation Note. Have that, hopefully move forward to full council agenda for March 8th. If council would approve that, then we would move forward to a closing and we would have dollars in hand within probably by the 3rd or 4th week of March. And that would allow Public Works to proceed with all these projects that they need to get moving now. And then in that June, July, August timeframe, we would come back to you with a full financing to cover the cost of those projects that we funded through the TRAN, and then secondarily to cover the cost of the remaining costs of those projects plus a larger list of projects that would cover at least a 2-year capital investment period. So again, just information only, but I wanted you to have a preview of what will be coming your way.
I appreciate that, Mr. Hopkins. Are there any questions in the short term about what he's presented this evening? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. President, that concludes the Finance Committee this evening.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
I'm so sorry. Mr. Harris.
Should be reference made, since it's on the agenda, to the signatory resolutions.
Yes, I believe I mentioned them at the top, that I neglected to let you know that they needed to be removed, and those resolutions 14, 15, and 16 will appear on our committee meeting agenda in March. Thank you very much. That concludes the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Beke. Councilor Craig, Community Planning.
Thank you, Council President. Community planning is now in order. We have 3 items on the agenda. The first being Administration Resolution 10, amending the sewer control plan to include the project at 800 South Queen Street. And I saw Douglas Smith here to give us more information on that. And I think we've done these many times before, so.
Good evening, councilors. Yes, we have done this many times before. I'll keep this short. So municipalities are required to develop and implement comprehensive official plans that address sewage disposal now and in the future. And when a new land development project is proposed, municipalities are required to revise that official plan. So we used to be exempt from this requirement, except the state changed its interpretation of the Clean Streams Law, and now we are required to submit these. Essentially, by approving the resolution, you're saying that the city of Lancaster has capacity to serve this new development. So this particular resolution is for 800 South Queen Street. This is the former Redmond site. There's a land development proposal that is under review currently by Bureau of Planning. They are proposing 69 affordable units and 8,300 square feet of commercial in a 5-story building along South Queen Street at the corner of Furnace. All parking is provided on site. There was an initial presentation of the Planning Commission, and we expect a revised plan in the coming month or so. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions from the committee? Any questions from the rest of the council? Questions from the public?
Just a question of order. If we approve this, does that mean we're approving this? It's still under review, or just this before the horse before the cart? Or why are we having this resolution? That means the program to build up.
This resolution means that it gets moved to tomorrow evening to council meeting. And from there, if it's approved, then we'll move forward.
So that means you're approving the project, right?
So it's
Or is that before, does that mean we're approving the project?
Please.
So the resolution does not mean that the city is approving the project. This is specifically to grant sewer capacity for the project. So we need to meet state requirements to say that we have the sewage disposal facilities to meet
The project gets approved.
the needs of new development.
Okay.
So these resolutions are often done early on in a development because they take many, many months to get approval from the state for. And in no way does it require us to allow the project to move forward. Ultimately, the final vote on the development will be from the Planning Commission, and then building permits, of course, after that would need to be satisfied.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the public? Hearing none, I'll hear a motion.
Councilor Craig, I motion to move this to full council.
Can I get a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's see here. The next item on the agenda is Administration Bill number 4, accepting the dedication of a right-of-way at 210 College Avenue. And that would be Mr. Smith again.
Yes, thank you, Councilor. So 210 College Ave is the southeast corner of the St. Joseph's Hospital development area, formerly known as the St. Joseph's Hospital. You might remember that this portion of the site, about 0.75 acres, is slated for transfer from UPMC to HDC Mid-Atlantic for developing affordable units. This was part of the rezoning effort that you all helped to negotiate previously. So that piece of land has been subdivided. There was a plan approved by the Planning Commission late last year. Through that process, we realized that a portion of the parcel at the corner of College and Marietta extended into what we thought was the right-of-way. In other words, their private land extended into part of the street. So we wanted to correct this issue. It's a minor issue, but we wanted to correct this issue and dedicate that portion of property, which I don't have the exact square footage, but it's probably no more than 100 square feet or so, dedicate that to the city so that it would include part of the road, the sewer inlet that's there, the curb, and some sidewalk as well. It's a small triangular portion. I did bring the plans in case you want me to roll them out and show you the exact area. I had city engineering, Cindy McCormick, send out inspectors to look at the area. We determined that it did meet city code and was in good condition, and that we're willing to receive this infrastructure as part of our right-of-way, and a portion of which we would then need to manage as roadway and a sewer inlet. I think that's all I have on that matter. Happy to answer questions.
So I do have one. So the dedication would mean that we would be responsible for the upkeep of that portion of land?
Well, for a portion of it. So there are a couple implications here. So by making it right-of-way, it now falls under our right-of-way ordinances. So use of the sidewalk in that area would be governed by our rights-of-way ordinances. So just like you may need a permit to sell on the sidewalk, or you can't obstruct a public right-of-way, all of that would apply to this new area of sidewalk. Sidewalk and curb are still the responsibility of the landowner to maintain. So we would not be taking on any maintenance there. The sewer inlet and the road, going back in history, we have probably always maintained as our roadway and infrastructure to begin with. So effectively, nothing is changing with this dedication, but it does clean up the land record and clarifies the ownership of the land.
Great. Are there questions from the committee? Questions from the rest of the council? Questions from the public? Hearing none, I'll hear a motion.
Councilor Craig, I motion to move bill number 4, 2022 to full council.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And lastly, we have a presentation on the update on proposed changes to the lead hazard control ordinance. Well, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Welcome, Councilor Calix, to the City Council. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I'm Rebecca Geiser. I'm the Deputy Director of Health, Housing, and Community Development in the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. And I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update tonight on the proposal for the lead poisoning prevention and lead hazard control ordinance, as well as the rental property ordinance. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our community engagement process, what we've learned over the past 5 months, and the adjustments we've made to meet the outcomes that we've been looking to meet with these ordinance changes. I'm going to review the purpose of the legislation from back in September that we discussed, give you a short overview of the city housing stock that will be impacted by these changes, tell you about our community engagement process, and then go through the proposed legislative changes. Some of this information is a repeat from the presentation in September, or if any of you have watched the presentations that we gave to landlords or childcare providers, some of it's a repeat, but I want to make sure that I revisit some of the important pieces of the framework. And again, welcome your questions as we go along at the end of the presentation if you have specific questions. We began to discuss these changes as we continued to see the effect of lead poisoning in our children. Specifically, the mayor, I think back in 2018, started this conversation, and we recognized the opportunity to continue to improve the quality of our housing stock through housing inspections. We have taken a detailed look at all the technical aspects of assessing lead risk, and we've worked to refine the requirements based on what will actually prevent lead poisoning in children, while also minimizing the costs to the community. And I'm pleased to report that the collective knowledge of staff certified in lead risk assessment and the landlord's practical knowledge have really enhanced the outcome of the legislation we're proposing. So our purpose is to enhance the lead safety protections in rental housing, to focus the city and community resources on the highest risk properties, minimize the costs and administrative burden on landlords while also upholding the improved standards and acting more quickly to remove children with elevated blood lead levels from a hazardous situation and further poisoning them. For an overview of the rental households, there are about 22,000 total households in the city of Lancaster. 54.4% of those are rental households, which is about 12,000. And of those, approximately 89% are living in pre-1978 housing, which are homes with potential lead hazards in them. So that's approximately 10,700 homes that are impacted by the legislation related to lead hazard control. So our commitments in this process since September have been the absolute importance of lead poisoning prevention and its impact to our community. That's really the driving factor, the driving force behind these changes. Our true interest in meeting the goal of decreasing and eliminating lead poisoning with ordinance changes and our commitment to listening and incorporating feedback from the public, including the landlords and childcare providers on the ordinance changes. We have engaged in a robust process and have provided a lot of information and spent time communicating with community stakeholders. So we started with the idea of safe and quality housing, as you can see in this diagram, and then presented the concept to council, went through the revision process, and now we're right at the tail end here of honing into the final ordinance recommendations. Our community engagement really was very transparent through the website, this rental ordinance change website. We have published all along all of our presentations, engagement documents, and updated as we went along, FAQs from questions that came from the community. We, following the council committee presentation in September, met with magisterial district judges to discuss these changes, then had a landlord meeting in October where we had 53 participants. Then in the end of October, had a child care provider meeting. We had 6 child care providers come to those meetings, one in English, one in Spanish. And then we had a second landlord meeting to update them with the revised changes based on their feedback in December. I did have about a dozen email exchanges within that process as well. We had a jot form on the website, as well as some emails that came into the mayor's office. I was able to respond directly to those as well. We did have other meetings with key stakeholders, and those are listed there. So specifically, why is it important to prevent childhood exposure to lead-based paint? I think we've really discussed this quite a bit, but just want to reiterate that there's no safe level of lead exposure in children. We had 94 children in the city of Lancaster that were diagnosed with elevated blood lead levels, and only about 8% of children are tested. So there's really a lot of cases, and we need to be more proactive than just diagnosing kids with lead poisoning. Here are some of the negative and permanent health implications for children who have lead poisoning on this side. And lead paint can harm anyone in the community. With ongoing exposure, we've really focused on the children because that is the group really who are most impacted, but pregnant women can also pass on lead to their unborn children, and people who have compromised systems can also have high impact, or just extended exposure in general to lead can really impact anyone in the community. So here's our summary of new changes to the lead poisoning prevention and lead hazard control ordinance. Our initial proposal was to require all rental properties built prior to 1978 to obtain a risk assessment and a lead safe certification every 2 years. We have changed that requirement to within 30 days of every systematic rental inspection, which is 4 years for most properties and 2 years for properties that are not well maintained, per the changes that we're proposing in the rental ordinance. The biggest change that we made to this requirement is that property can be exempt from this requirement if they pass a lead hazard evaluation by a city housing inspector at the time of the systematic rental inspection. So there is an option for well-maintained properties to be exempt from having to go into the private sector and pay for a lead safe certification and risk assessment if their property is well-maintained, and the city housing inspector can confirm at the time of the systematic rental inspection. Overall, this was a less costly option than requiring a privately conducted lead risk assessment every 2 years. We did maintain the requirement that all child care providers maintain a lead safe certification every 2 years. That did not change from the initial proposal. And require all Lancaster City Housing Authority properties to demonstrate compliance with HUD's existing lead safe housing rule. We did a deep dive with LCHA about what their requirements are federally. They do have stringent requirements through HUD, and we don't want to duplicate or have a different requirement for them, but we would like confirmation that they are doing those things that they're already required to by federal. So we are working directly with them to figure out the best way to make sure those properties are lead safe while they are complying with the federal regulations. So I wanted to give you an overview of the criteria to pass the lead hazard evaluation by city housing inspector. Again, the property would then be issued this low risk designation. They're not getting a full lead safe certification the way the property would if they had a private lead risk assessor evaluation, but they would be able to be designated as low risk. So this is if the windows and casings are replaced, no evidence of chipping or peeling paint, no evidence of door friction where the paint dust could be coming off, no evidence of exposed lead-based paint on the stairs, no bare soil, no construction debris inside or outside the house. And then beyond that visual inspection, there would be a few dust wipes taken, not as extensive as they would be in a full clearance examination, but a few dust wipe samples that could pass through and meet the EPA requirement for lead dust. So if the properties are issued this lead low risk designation by the city housing inspector, that would be valid until the time of their next systematic rental inspection. So they would not need to do anything else between the systematic rental inspections. The property would not be issued this low risk status if any component of the visual assessment failed, or if the lead dust wipe samples failed. And in that case, the city would still require the lead safe certification by an outside company within 30 days of the systematic rental inspection. So this is really a system to reward the landlords who have kept up their properties, who have already done a lot of renovations, and who don't seem to have a lead risk to do something that's less extensive, but still really protect children in the process. Another major change here is that this is going to happen at the time of the systematic inspection. So whereas we are proposing that this would go into effect January 1st, 2023, we're now proposing that the rollout will be with the first systematic inspection from 2023 to 2026. So the rollout will be slow for all the properties, as the housing inspectors will have a chance to have the systematic rental inspection to do the evaluation. I'd like to point out that the landlords are not required to do one or the other of these. They need to do one or the other. They don't have to do, if they don't want to, say, replace their windows or meet those visual assessment requirements, they can go through the regular lead safe certification that would not require them to do that. So there's sort of an option for them in this case. They have to prove that their properties are lead safe, but we can do it in two different ways that seem to make the most sense for them. So we're also looking to strengthen the elevated blood lead level case response. We've reduced the time for case response to better protect children. Currently, the property owner is given 21 days to respond to get an environmental investigation when the child is exposed. And we have reduced that amount of time to give them 72 hours to arrange for that environmental investigation and 10 days to complete it. So we have spoken with risk assessors. This is plenty of time for them to be able to get that done, and reduces the amount of time that the child would potentially be exposed in their property. If these conditions aren't met, then the city, in that letter, will issue saying we will order the environmental investigation if the property owner does not do so themselves, so that we can clearly identify where the lead risk is for that child. The second part of this EBLL case response went through several iterations as well. Where we landed was giving health officers, our recommendation is to give them the explicit authority to remove the child from the property that's causing the lead poisoning. So this is not removing a child from the family. This is not involving Department of Children's Services. This is saying that the child and one parent or guardian would be removed from that house, from that physical property, so that they're no longer being exposed to the lead paint, particularly in the case where they have an elevated blood level, where they require chelation and treatment, 45 micrograms. To give you a sense, the CDC defines too high of a level as 3 or above, and this would be only if the child had 45 micrograms per deciliter. So it's really a very, very high level and a situation where you need to get the child out very quickly. So those were all the changes to the lead ordinance. For the rental property ordinance, we are recommending to issue a 2-year rental license rather than 1 year to streamline the process for property owners. Authorizing the development of policies and procedures so that we can establish systematic rental inspections no more than once every 2 years, no less than every 6 years, but primarily keeping them on a 4-year cycle. That did not change from the initial proposal either. During this time, we did, this is a good night to be doing the fee study. I did a mini fee study there of how much this will cost the city to do these during the rental inspections. And it will equate to an increase in the rental license fee of $75 per year to incorporate that cost of the lead hazard evaluation during the systematic lead inspection into that rental license fee. This is opposed to, our initial proposal would have cost approximately $250 per unit per every 2 years for the private evaluation. And of course, that all depends on the market. The costs can vary widely, but this was really $150 over 2 years instead of $250 per unit over 2 years. So I think we really met that criteria of meeting the goal while also reducing the cost. We're going to incorporate the lead hazard control changes into the ordinance and then formally establish a random sampling process for multi-unit properties. So instead of requiring the lead safe certification and the systematic for every single unit, requiring a certain percentage of those to be done during the systematic, which will also reduce the cost for the property owners while making sure that we're ensuring quality. So this revised proposal really addressed 3 major community concerns that we heard during the community engagement. The first was that the community asked us to focus on high-risk properties and to not waste resources on low-risk properties. So people who have really gutted their houses, made a really nice, already replaced the windows and the doors, not to charge them the additional cost of going through that lead safe certification every 2 years. Which goes along with the second point there, reducing the cost to the community while still preventing lead poisoning. And then ensuring landlord and tenant education. This came up again and again. How are we going to make sure that the tenants know how to prevent lead poisoning? How are the landlords going to know to make sure their properties are lead safe? So some of the components that we're going to engage in now as we look forward to passing the legislation, is to do landlord education and information sessions, continuing on the website, through mailers and through in-person sessions, provide tenant education, including on the website, maybe a video distributed at the time of the systematic inspections to both the landlords and to the tenants, and then continued promotion of the lead hazard program, both through LGH and through the city. And that's where I want to make a big connection. The time to address lead hazards and childhood lead poisoning is right now. We're increasing our standards to prevent lead poisoning and making available big funds for low to moderate income households to make the needed improvements. The community has committed $60 million into lead hazard control in homes, and so this is really, we're meeting the need of the community with resources as well. And these are really unprecedented funds And we have wide community commitment to increase the workforce and access to remediate the lead risks. So we're going all together, and we're really enthusiastic about this partnership. As a final reminder, we are proposing that with the exception of the increased elevated blood lead level response, which would happen immediately, the changes to the lead ordinance and the rental property ordinance would happen starting in January of 2023. So that gives us time to educate the community and the rollout to be realistic. And I'd just like to thank the many community partners, landlords, childcare providers who provided input into this process. We recognize that the strength of this proposal and legislation is because of the practical experience of many of the landlords in the community, and also our staff who are lead risk assessors who have just provided hours and hours of technical expertise in what really makes homes safe for kids. And so I just really appreciate the time and energy that the staff and the community have put into this process. I personally did not really know anything about lead poisoning when I started on this journey, and so I've been well educated myself over the course of the past 5 months as well. Next steps, we're anticipate bringing specific legislative language and an ordinance amendments to the council committee meeting in March. So that is the overview. I'm glad to answer any questions. Again, if you're interested in more details, Mr. Calixte, I know you missed sort of the beginning part of the presentations. They're all on that website there if you'd like to hear the presentations or see the PowerPoints from prior presentations.
Thank you, Rebecca. I do have one question. Early on in your presentation, you said that the landlords have one of two ways to remediate, which are replace or...
Sure, I can go back to that slide. So initially, every single property was going to have to go through an outside company to do a lead risk assessment and then obtain a lead safe certification from an outside company, which those requirements are published by HUD and by the EPA of how exactly to do that. And it's really pages and pages of how to do a lead clearance. We tried to simplify the process for properties that are kept up, and so the city housing inspectors will utilize these criteria that are on this slide to designate a low lead risk and exempt the property from having to go through the costly and time-consuming process of scheduling an outside lead safe certification with an outside company. So if they prefer to go with the outside company because they haven't met these criteria, that's no problem. It doesn't look poorly upon them at all. They can go and do exactly what we've been requiring for the past years in terms of properties that have kids that are 6 and under living in them to have that lead safe certification. So they don't have to replace their windows. If they don't want to, they don't have to. They just have to be able to pass the clearance that has been required before.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from the committee?
If I may, Councilor Craig? Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Geiser, and also thank you for the extensive process of making sure that we got community input through these ordinances. It's really appreciated. Question regarding the fees. I'm a little confused as to what exactly the total fee is going to be. So the fee change will be every 2 years now. What's going to be the total cost per unit for rental units moving forward if this is implemented?
Good question. Currently, we are charging $50 per unit per year, and we're proposing that fee go up to $250 every 2 years. So that's an increase of $75 per year, but it would then, instead of going through the whole administrative process every year, we'd be going every other year. So from $50 every year to $250 every 2 years.
Great. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all, Councilor Craig.
Are there any further questions from the committee?
Yes, please, Councilor Gregg. Thank you for your presentation. It's very informative. But the question that I have for you is, are there any preventions? Since you mentioned in your presentation that you want waste resources on low-risk properties, so are there any measures of preventions that can be used for the low-risk properties?
To see whether it is low risk?
Yes.
So we're proposing that the definition of a low-risk property is if the windows have been replaced, if there's no chipping or peeling paint, no door friction, no bare soil on the outside of the property. So an extensive visual assessment of the property can be done very quickly by a housing inspector. And in fact, they're doing this in every systematic inspection anyway, observing these visuals and then taking there's a process whereby you take a wipe of the dust in the house and then measure how much lead is contained in that dust. And for a lead safe certification by an outside company, you have to take many, many, many dust wipes across the whole property. In this case, we are greatly reducing that just to take a few samples throughout the house to make sure there's no obvious lead dust. So I hope I answered your question. It's very technical, but trying to give the easiest way for housing inspectors to see, based on what we know, what would be the way that we would designate this as low risk. And these are the criteria that the lead risk assessors that are on our staff.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Defined.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Are there any other questions from the rest of council?
May I?
Councilor Diaz.
Sorry. In regards to the fees, have you found with the discussions of all the property owners that are renting that they may push that fee to the actual home renter? Have you heard any discussions or anything of that nature?
That's a good question. We have had some landlords say we're going to turn around and charge our tenants for that fee. There was a study done in Rochester, New York, who implemented a similar legislation of lead safe certification. That was a big concern for them as well. And they found that rents in that city did not go up as a result of the requirement for the lead safe certification. I do believe we have reduced the cost based on our first presentation. But it's true, some landlords may pass on that cost to their tenants. I will say that when a child is diagnosed with an elevated blood lead level and has to have treatment or be removed from the home, over time, that cost, both for that child at that time and that family at that time, but then to society overall for all of the learning disabilities and things that come along with that, is a very, very expensive proposition. So the prevention really is an economic benefit as well to the community.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council? Questions from the public? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Geiser, for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you
Very
for your
informative.
time.
Council President, that concludes community planning.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. That brings us to the Public Works Committee. And Mr. Calixte or Councilor Diaz, as you do not have a chair, does one of you have a preference? You want to have a chair until tomorrow evening. Does one of you have a preference, or would one of you like to jump in and run the committee? Councilor Calixte, I can sort of walk you through it. So you'll have,
Okay.
So you would open it, and then the first item would be Administration Resolution Number 11, 2022.
All right, so the first item on the Public Works Committee tonight is the resolution number 11, 2022, accepting an automated red light enforcement grant from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to be used at the intersection of South Queen and Fernan Streets for pedestrian safety improvements. So I think we are ready to listen to Mr. A. Campbell.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me and hearing this resolution, this proposed resolution. This is a resolution for accepting funds from PennDOT for the Automated Red Light Enforcement, which we call ARLE, A-R-L-E. It is a means by which we can pay for or leverage funds to do safety-related things in public right-of-way. The project will provide curb bump outs and rectangular rapid flashing beacons to the intersection of South Queen and Farnham Street, and it will also improve pedestrian safety. This particular intersection is part of the high injury network, and even though it had been identified before as a relatively dangerous intersection before we finished the Vision Zero plan, because it is on the high injury network, it rated higher in the evaluation by PennDOT to get this kind of funding. The intersection is located within 100 feet of the Early Education Center, 500 feet of Carter McRae Elementary School, 400 feet of Farnham Street East with 170 units of affordable housing for elderly, and 900 feet of the recently renovated Culleton Park. There were 9 reportable crashes at this intersection, with 3 pedestrian crashes from 2015 to 2019. The proposed bump outs will calm traffic, improve safety for the residents that live in this area, and improve access by the children going to and from the Early Childhood Center and the school. Residents and business owners had previously requested a traffic signal at this location, but according to PennDOT guidelines, the traffic volumes were not met to justify or to trigger having that type of an infrastructure. This, however, is the first location in many along South Queen Street where pedestrian improvements will be made to provide safe access for residents along this corridor. The total cost of the project is going to be just under $300,000. The contribution by the city is only $40,000, which leverages $235,000 from PennDOT to do this work. So basically, we are paying 1/7 of the cost to greatly improve this particular intersection. Obviously, we want to use ARL money for many of the other high injury networks in the Vision Zero program, but this will be, in essence, one of the first. We've used ARL before, but this will be one of the first fully under the Vision Zero program. The goal is for the intersection to be designed during the course of this fiscal year, fiscal 22, bidding and contracting in the fall, and for the actual construction and installation of the curb cuts, the mechanical work, et cetera, in early 2023. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Campbell. I do have a question. When you're saying that PennDOT would not allow this, basically a stoplight, traffic light, how big do you think this flashing light, or kind of like, what is it gonna look like, is what I'm trying to know.
It's a good question. It's part of some of the evolving technology for dealing with these kinds of intersections. It can be activated not only by a person at the intersection pushing the button saying that I want to be able to cross, and there'll be these flashers, but also it has the ability to sense when traffic is coming too close, too fast. So they're basically horizontal elements that have flashers that intermittently flash and bring to any driver or vehicularist's attention that something's going on, they need to slow down in that particular intersection. And as many of you may know, as you're going north on South Queen Street, you're getting to a rise at Farnham, so the visible ability to see cars coming when you're trying to cross from east to west is hampered. So being able to push this button and or have it automatically respond to you is very, very important to increase the safety at that rise.
So when you're saying, just by curiosity, someone that may have, that might be blind, and they're coming close to it, are they going to be able to hear or is it going to pick up a sense that that person is near there, that can give them like some kind of a warning?
So we have similar pieces of this on West King Street near Manor Street, and they do emit sound saying warning or that you have 20 seconds to cross this intersection, et cetera. I believe, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure if it actually senses the pedestrian, because there is the ability for the pedestrian to push the button. And it is set up so that there's braille and other ways of interacting with the device. I would have to get back to you to see if it actually detects a pedestrian coming near.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from other council members? From the public? Okay, thank you. One second. So may I have a motion to approve, to move the resolution to the meeting tomorrow night for approval?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So that will bring us to the next item on the Public Works Committee, which is a presentation on a proposed program for sidewalk and curb repair.
Thank you very, very much as well. This particular presentation is not a visual presentation. It is just a verbal presentation, but it is introducing an idea that had been presented in the budget hearings of a program to be able to assist in the payment or in the process of financing the sidewalk repair program. The city of Lancaster recognizes that the sidewalks and curbs adjacent areas that are slated for paving often need to be repaired. We recognize that we do assessments of those sidewalks to comply with the federal ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, and to reduce and/or eliminate tripping hazards. And recognizing that once we assess those hazards, and under the practice that sidewalks and curbs are the responsibility of the property owner, those property owners are then issued property violation notices and are given a limited amount of time to be able to rectify the damaged situation of the sidewalk or the curb. We also want to recognize as a matter of equity that safety and thus compliance with ADA is something to which all residents of the city of Lancaster are entitled. We, the city, also recognize that these public property violation notices are rarely planned for, and the costs and timing of repairing or replacing these sidewalks and curbs are at best inconvenient, and at worst, a financial burden for the property owner. And so, the city is about to propose a program that mitigates the burden of the property owner and encourages the necessary work to be performed with, at minimum, the following benefits. It will be performed, we believe, at a lower cost to the property owner. It will be performed in a timely manner because of the nature of the way we would procure this, where the construction and workmanship are performed to city standards. And it'll be performed where the work is warranted for a full 3 years after installation. This is to try to avoid the challenge of private property owners managing the construction of a contractor, finding that the work isn't necessarily correct, having a repeat PVN, and then still having to pay additional money. So if we can warrant that that work will be approved or can be repaired at no expense to the owner for the following 3 years, I think that is also a benefit, not only to the property owner, but to the city. And we are wanting to put in place a reasonable payback program with even the possibility of a grant to perform the work. The program would consist of the following, no matter what the cost of that sidewalk and curb repair. Option A would be to pay in full before the date required and earn a discount, as yet to be determined, so that it could not only incentivize people doing the work in a timely manner, but also ensure that there's a sufficient cash flow or more cash flow to try to financially self-sustain this program. The second option would be to enter into a repayment program with a very low interest rate, repaid at the rate we're proposing at this moment of approximately $100 per month until paid off. So if you get a public violation notice and it's going to cost approximately $2,000 to repair that sidewalk, not necessarily at your convenience, you would have approximately 20 months to pay that back if that's the amount that everyone agrees is an appropriate amount for payback. The third would be to link into eligibility requirements for further advantages that can be considered, including even better financing terms or even grant eligibility, the ability for that cost to become a grant. We're looking at the critical repair program guidelines as the guidelines that we would use for eligibility, so that there would basically be a means test, and if you're eligible for a grant under critical repair, you would also be eligible for a grant under this program to get the sidewalks done. Of course, the property owner will always have the option of performing the work on their own, under their own power, under their own contractor, etc. But other advantages of this program that we want to consider include a competitive bidding by the city, and taking into the account the volume of sidewalks to be performed, we're hoping that this would provide better prices to do the work than individual contracts by the owner. We would be waiving permit fees and the actual administration of the construction, so the paperwork challenges of a private property owner to try to coordinate through a bureaucracy would be eliminated. That would be done by you having signed into the program, and we, through our administration and through the contractor, would administer those other aspects. Supervision and certification will be by the city, so our inspectors would be available to look at the work and to inspect the work as it's being done, so that if it does not meet the requirements, it will be repaired or rectified in that moment, not with a follow-up PVN. This program would apply to all property owners, residential, commercial, or tax exempt, because the goal is that we're trying to make sure that there is access and means to expeditiously repair and or replace the sidewalks that are necessary, and make sure that we've got public safety on those sidewalks where it is assessed that there's a problem. The 3-year warranty, one can imagine that the relative useful life of a new sidewalk is approximately 10 years, give or take a few years, but that 3-year warranty takes you well into that useful life of that sidewalk, where if there's a problem, the city or its contractor would be responsible to make the change. And it will apply to those who have outstanding PVNs that have been problematic for our pavement schedule. So during COVID, there are a number of PVNs that we have not enforced, more because we were conscious of the financial burden on many of those property owners. But this program would apply to those old PVNs as well. They probably need to be reassessed because time has gone by. We've gone through 2 winters, and the condition of those sidewalks may have deteriorated even further. Other advantages to the city include getting the work performed so that we can perform paving on schedule, especially as we are more aggressively doing paving throughout the city. All parts of the city get sidewalk improvements as major paving is performed, and thus there is equity that any community gets equal access to this opportunity. And by utilizing the block strength indicator as part of the metric for the program, we're doing some of the measurements that indicate to what extent these improved pavements, not just of the street pavement, but of the sidewalks and curbs, improve the block strength indicator for that particular community. And although this is a new program, it may be tweaked over time to be more effective and efficient. We're hoping that we're in the process of writing what the regs and guidelines for this would be. We're hoping to get some input from you about any concerns that you might have, but also we're hoping that we will be able to come back to council in the first council meeting of March and introduce it as a resolution first reading. The reason we're trying to do it this expeditiously is so that this program can apply to the sidewalks that need to be repaired as we go into fiscal '22. Where there's a certain amount of sidewalk and street paving that we're about to do, and what we want in general is to be improving that whole part of the public right-of-way while we're improving the street. And rather than improve the street and then 1 or 2 years later, dig up the street while we're trying to repair sidewalks. So if you have any questions or if you have any concerns that you'd like me to be aware of, I'd be very happy to hear them.
Councilor Diaz, please go ahead.
Mr. Campbell, in regards to the properties and the grants and the applications, my question would be, will the city put a lien on a resident if they are signing up to, let's say, the 2-year program?
If the funds are not paid back, if the people do not repay on the terms of what is signed, as with any other construction, yes, a lien would apply to them. But if it applies to the property itself, so the property owner is the entity that is responsible. If it is a owner resident, then it will be that person. If it is the absentee landlord, it would be the absentee landlord.
To the landlord,
Yes.
not to the actual
Not to
renter?
the occupant, not to the renter.
That's all I had a question. Thank you.
Are there any questions from all the council members? I do have a question, Mr. Campbell. I would like to know if the sidewalk and curb repair will facilitate the circulation of people with disabilities.
How does it? So under ADA, there are guidelines that say that the pavement cannot rise more than approximately 1/4 of an inch, believe it or not, because that becomes a tripping hazard for anyone, but also for elderly, people with walkers, people who are in canes, or in some cases, where it's even more extreme than that, it's very difficult for people in wheelchairs to negotiate the sidewalk. So universally, it is the ADA guidelines that determine what the PVN will trigger.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from the public?
I know I have to say my name again. I'm Nicolas, 804 Highland Avenue. I have 2 questions. One of your contractors did work on Highland Avenue and they cracked my sidewalk. And they haven't done anything. And I told them when they were there. What does the citizen do? I didn't crack it.
Well, thank you very much for that question. Certainly under this program, it would be under warranty within those first 3 years, and so we'd be able to require that contractor to go back. At this moment, we don't have that program, so it may be a contractor that was off of a list that we recommended, but it's not under this program. And I apologize for that as a challenge or an inconvenience, but that's one of the things that we're hoping this kind of a program would also resolve, so that if you did go under this program and there was still a crack, or it created a crack, that could be remedied at no cost to the property owner.
Yeah, it was one of those contractors that did those funny things, the slow things in Highland Avenue. I got new sidewalks, but they cracked one near the, so, do I call you or?
You can certainly call us and let me know what the address is. I can give you my card right now, as a matter of fact.
It's 804 Highland.
Well-
I'll let you know, right there. Where they did that, those humps, I don't know what they call them.
Speed bumps? Or
Yeah,
the-
no, it wasn't speed
It
bumps.
was
It's
the
like those
ADA,
yeah.
ADA curb cuts?
Yes, really. And then there was another thing that, what do we do when the people that put the pole, PP&L, didn't put the pole where it should be, and it closed the whole sidewalk? this lady that lives there has to go on the street. And that's it. You know what I'm saying? And that's on Queen Street, across from the 800 block where they're gonna do this thing, right?
So this is unfortunately a challenge that we often have. And part of what we do with the inspection is try to confirm that the pole is going where it's supposed to go, but that it also meets certain of the clearance requirements. So if you have a pinch point, basically you're trying to keep approximately 4 feet clear going in any way on a sidewalk. However, if there's a pinch point, ADA allows it to go down to 3'7". And so my hope is, and you could certainly refer to that particular address to me as well, but my hope is that even though the pole may have been in a different place than it originally was, I'm hoping that they made sure that there was the 3'7" clearance. If not, we may have a different kind of a challenge. And at this moment, I don't quite know.
It has to do, where you said that it's supposed to be high. We have a lady that comes from work and she comes in one of those wheelchairs and she has to go in the street because it's right there in the church that's on between Furnace Street and Highland. And it's the parking where they go to park and she cannot go through there.
So,
And it's a sidewalk, but I don't know what we call it.
so let me say that
It's an antique. It's an antique.
that anyone who has a question or issue about whether something complies or is clearly within the regulation or not can reach out to the Department of Public Works and ask that question property by property, address by address.
Okay.
And we will have inspectors or whomever review that particular situation and get you an actual answer for that particular
So the
situation.
Department of Public Works is,
Yes, the Department of Public Works.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Do you have is there any questions?
Councilor Kalik, can I ask one question?
Oh, yes.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Campbell. You mentioned someone can contact the Department of Public Works if, there's a potential for a violation in the sidewalk. Are there systematic checks around the city for assessing the sidewalks in different locations?
So generally speaking, we assess the situations in 2 particular ways. One, if we're about to do street paving, we do assess the sidewalks alongside the areas that we're planning to do paving, so that our intention can be that when we're making those improvements along any stretch of the roadway, we're also making the improvements along the adjacent sidewalks. That has not always been the case. This is kind of an evolution of policy. But we also, anytime there's a complaint or a tripping and fall hazard or any of those kinds of things, that also comes to our attention, and that gets added to the list, and PVNs or property violation notices are issued in those cases. If there is a tripping hazard or a tripping situation, we also reserve the right to look not just at that immediate piece of property, but at the nearby or adjacent properties as well, because it may actually be a systemic situation along that stretch. And if you improve one piece but don't improve the next piece, you really haven't solved anything.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes?
Thomas, just one more question. If there's a property and you're driving down, but it's the side of their home, and you see a tree, which we have a lot of those issues where the tree's, rooted out and it's uneven, would that be considered that property owner, or would that be considered something where the city would be responsible for, since it's kind of not in front, but on the side of that property?
If the way that the accepted practice is that anything in that sidewalk inside the curb is the responsibility of the property owner. So if you, unfortunately, and this is one of the challenges that actually encouraged us to think about a different way. If you are on a corner lot and you have maybe a 10 or 15-foot frontage, but you also have a 90-foot length along the side, when that property violation notice comes and is looking at all of the possible changes along that long length, this is incredibly expensive proposition for that property owner, something that was never planned for, and people may have hoped would not be visited upon them. This program is not to remove the challenge. It is to make it easier for the challenge to be addressed. So in that particular case, the requirement still falls to the property owner. We can work with them, but the intention is to create a sidewalk that fulfills and meets the ADA requirements.
Are there any other questions?
If I could just, Councilor Calix,
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to thank the Department of Public Works and our Solicitor Barry Handwerger for bringing this program forward. This has literally been something that we've been working on, a sidewalk repair fund, since I got here in 2018. And it's been in fits and starts to figure out how to do this. And for us to be able to offer a grant and loan program to all of the property owners in the city to address the sidewalk and sidewalk repairs is very significant because it is literally right outside the front of their doorsteps. And so we appreciate, just wanted to acknowledge the work that the Department of Public Works has done to get us to this point, and particularly Cindy McCormick and her team in the public right-of-way.
Cindy has been the primary catalyst to make this happen, partly because she's on the front line of dealing with the people to whom we issue these PVNs. Okay.
So are there any questions from the public? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, sir. That would conclude the Public Works Committee for tonight, Mr. President.
Well done, Councilor Calix. Thank you. That brings us to Economic Development. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Council President. I'll call to order the Economic Development Committee. I have a brief update on the request for proposal for compliance services related to our American Rescue Plan Act funds. The City of Lancaster has received 15 responses. As a reminder, the city is seeking assistance for the following, which is drafting solicitations for award of city ARPA funds, determining the applicable grant requirements to include in such solicitations, provide assistance and guidance in evaluating responses to such solicitations, and managing grant recipients managing grant recipients' compliance with awards given for such solicitations. One of the first objectives of the firm will be to finalize a request for proposal for the city's affordable housing initiative. And the next step in the process will be to establish a review committee comprised of myself, Controller James Reichenbach, and staff, which will include Barry Handwerger, Chris Delfs, and Jess King. We plan to select the compliance firm by the end of February. And that concludes my update, Council President.
Thank you very much, Councilor Arroyo. That brings us to the Committee of the Whole, where we have two items. The first is Council Resolution Number 13, 2022, which is our annual resolution recognizing Black History Month. And I will probably expound more on this, at tomorrow night's meeting. But this year's resolution focuses on voting rights and voting access, which has been dearly important to African American history, both here in Lancaster and across the country. And of course, we recognize, this council recognizes African American History Month every year. And as such, I would hear a motion from any councilor to move this forward to tomorrow night's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the resolution. Council comments.
Council President, it's nice to be able to recognize Black History Month every year, just like clockwork. You know, there's African American people all over the city, and you know, it's just a good feeling to be recognized. Yeah.
and then just because I am who I am, for anybody who didn't know this, or who might be watching along at home, African American History Month or Black History Month began as Negro History Week, as created by Carter G. Woodson, who is the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And so I think, we've come a long way in recognizing this, in this history, to the Smithsonian Museum on the Mall, to our own recognitions of Black history right here in Lancaster. So I'm very excited. Anyway, other council comments? From the public?
Ivan Acosta Velez, 804 Highland. I would like to thank you for doing this for my nanny. My first language was English. I had a black African beautiful lady that took care of me. And it was in Passaic, New Jersey, when I first came from Puerto Rico. And it was very special, especially her cornbread. Nobody beats that, okay? So thank you so much, because a lot of people in Puerto Rico, we do have African roots. We also have Taino roots, and we also have Spanish roots from Spain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Other than that, hearing none, Mr. Harris? Or actually, I guess it is Committee of the Whole. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was much easier. That brings us to our second agenda item, which is exciting just on the reading of it. Administration Bill number 3, creating the Department of Neighborhood Engagement. First, I'll hear a motion.
Motion to send this to full council on February 8th, tomorrow.
Second.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director?
Actually, I'm going to take this.
Please.
And Millsy can certainly weigh in. This is very exciting, and this is really an opportunity that we have through the optional charter of the Third Class City Code to elevate what was the Office of Neighborhood Engagement to become a Department of Neighborhood Engagement, putting it on par with the other departments within the city of Lancaster. This would also institutionalize the Department of Neighborhood Engagement and in recognition of the work of the soon-to-be, I hope, Department of Neighborhood Engagement. So within that, within neighborhood engagement, many of you know and are very familiar with the work of Millsy Carrasco since her inception in this role, for the very first time in this role, and creating this job in 2018. And you also know that this was one of the things that I campaigned upon in 2017, and that was a priority, was to elevate the voices of our residents in the work of city government. And since that time, I'm just going to call out a couple of specific examples of work that has happened within the Office of Neighborhood Engagement that has now become much larger. So, for example, we started out with a housing social worker pilot because we are hearing so many things about housing concerns from our residents. That is now a position that is funded through CDBG funds. We no longer have a pilot, we have a full-time person in that role whose name is Sonia. We've also taken the work of becoming a certified welcoming city, which we also began in 2018, and that has led us to expand our language access program quite significantly and to have Zaira Falou working with all of our departments across the organization to make sure that all of our services are available to all of the people in the city of Lancaster. In addition, there have been many other special projects. One of them, of course, was census and the work that Millsy coordinated to ensure that we were counted. And although I wouldn't necessarily call this a special project, I would call this an extremely, extraordinarily a challenging and daunting project that we are still working through, which is COVID-19 and our response to our community, in which the Office of Neighborhood Engagement completely, another overused word, but pivoted their activities to really support the community and making sure that they had access to the information that they needed, masks, hand sanitizer, and then when we were able to get to it, vaccinations. These are just a few of the examples of accomplishments since 2018. As the Office of Neighborhood Engagement transitions to become the Department of Neighborhood Engagement, do just want to underscore the additional responsibilities that Director Carrasco has taken on. That includes overseeing the Lancaster Office of Promotion and our Visitor Center with additional staff oversight, as well as all of the vistas that we are in the process of onboarding, of which there are 11, and that is also being overseen, as well as our Neighborhood Leaders Academy, which will be launching again this spring, along with a Spanish language track that will just be obviously for Spanish speaking folks as part of neighborhood engagement. And so it's for all of these reasons and the integral part that the hopefully Department of Neighborhood Engagement, I'm just going to start calling it that, in anticipation of a vote tomorrow night, which is that all of our departments depend on engagement to advance their work. And so Ms. Carrasco has been working to develop plans and supports for every department and their engagement efforts so that we can ensure consistency of engagement, whether we're talking about work that the Police Bureau is doing, whether we're talking about Department of Public Works and a special project like the Conestoga Parks Master Plan or the Milburn Park renovations, and also within the community planning and economic development. So for all of those reasons, it felt right to elevate this from an Office of Neighborhood Engagement to a Department of Neighborhood Engagement. And I look forward to Council recognizing the work of Director Carrasco and supporting this administration bill tomorrow evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here. Council President and Council, it's been an incredible over 3 years of being here. In April, it'll be my 4th year, full 4 years, and it's really exciting. So in 2018, we started this department. The mayor had this vision of really unifying community and building equity across all citywide projects and departments. And as you know, I started off by myself, and then Zaira came along, and in 2018 was really just understanding what the community needs were, developing programming, and understanding the tools that we had within our capacity. So the last 3 years, we really focused on that, developing the programming, talking to residents. The last 6 months has been really, we have established the programs that we have and built some really great community connections. And we've been really afforded a lot of gifts the last year. So the merger of departments has increased the staff for Department of Neighborhood Engagement that we're so thankful for. And really the opportunity to partner across our other departments where they're providing funding to help support, we just hired our programs manager position, and that was funded through CBDG funds, through CPED, so I really appreciate that. The leadership and the support that we get on budgeting, from Patrick, and all of the direction that Steve provides, as well as Jess. So it is an incredible team that I'm really thankful for, and I didn't want to do this. And we take this seriously. Everybody on our team does. I think what I'm most excited for the future is we have these tools, we have now the capacity to really have an engaged city, to engage more residents that we've ever had the opportunity to, and that's through programming and events, to develop a citywide engagement plan and process, and really start talking about policy work, which I'm really excited to start working on with our solicitor. And ultimately just be a world-class known everywhere about the work that we're doing in the city, because we are really innovators in this area, and it's pretty exciting. We want to be the city that we're known for engagement and to be a model for other cities. So those were the things that came out of our team building, the last team building that we had in our team discussion. And I just can't tell you how thankful and privileged that I feel to be part of this process and to be entrusted by all of you. So I also encourage you to please move this bill forward to 03/2022. We have a lot of people in the community as well as our team. I think they deserve all their hard work that they put into this work. So I thank you so much for this opportunity and thank everyone for being here. Thanks.
I will just say there is a lot on city council that we get to take credit for, and a lot of processes that are very different now in the city over the past 4 years. And she doesn't take a lot of public credit for them, but very many of those are thanks to Director Carrasco. I mean, I think when we think about how we engage with folks who are displaced from their housing, or, I mean, for those of you who were on council that evening where we had 30 people who were displaced come to the podium and read us the Riot Act, Millsy in a weekend put together tens of thousands of dollars and a program to help rehouse them. Language access in the city of Lancaster, the Love Your Blocks program, and the PACE Neighbors, the Neighborhood Leadership Academy. I mean, the list goes on. This is the very least I think that we can do to recognize the work that you've done and the contribution that you've made to our city. So thank you, Millsy, and thank you, Mayor Sirachi, for having the foresight to create this department specifically, because it's exactly what our community has needed. I'm going to put away my soapbox now. Are there any other council comments?
Council President?
Please.
I simply want to just thank Director Carrasco. I think I'm so glad that we're able to take this step this evening to make, and put it in writing, and really recognize the depth of the work that you and your department does. And it really does reach across every other department. So I'm proud to support this and proud of all the work that you've done. Thank you.
Council President.
Please.
I just want to say thanks, Millsy. Great job. I look forward to doing more with you in the future, but wonderful, more deserving.
Council President?
Please.
Keep my comments brief. This is probably well overdue, but Ms. Carrasco, you have just made such an impact in the community, not only through the work that you do, but the work that your team does. And one of the things that I love about City Hall is the team that works here, and you just shine super, super bright. So thank you, and I look forward to supporting this to move forward.
Are there any comments from the, please?
Yes, I just wanna thank you very much, Millsy, because you are one of the people who have always supported me since the beginning. And so I congratulate you for your service. I really appreciate what you have done for the community, and I hope to work with you because part of the issues that I want to address as a council member is related to what you're doing as a director of Neighborhood Engagement Department. Thank you also for your leadership and for the mayor yeah, for her leadership, also because they are giving really good example of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for saying my name in the proper pronunciation.
From the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris, if you would, I think this is important enough, if you would humor me so much as to make this a roll call vote.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Beke.
Aye.
Mr. Colexi.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waydell.
Aye. Given the hour, Mr. Harris, we have your report. Do you mind if we instruct counselors to take a read of it?
Entirely okay with that.
Okay. Thank you. With no other business, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Patrick, can